Hey everybody, we are in the garage today. We're going to look at the GH2. It's a pretty simple filter grinder, but if you've never owned one before, we're going to show you how it is. We are going to look at the GH2. First thing we're going to do is take the adjustment knob off. When you do this, you got to make sure you don't lose the internal parts of the adjustment knob. So there's the screw and the sticker. There's the knob itself and this little circlet which lives inside. There are 4 different tabs in there, and one, right where the indicator is higher than the others, and that is how that circlet fits into that cap. After we get the knob off, you will also see you have an adjustment ring on the outside of the grinder, and I believe for that we need a 2mm hex or Allen key. You just loosen them a little bit. There are 2 set screws. When you get those loose, it should loose enough, it should come right off. And let us not forget, there is this little tension spring with a little piece of rubber in it. Most people don't know it's there, so when they take the knob off, it often just falls off, bounces on the floor, and is never seen again, and that could allow your dial to wander. So make sure you keep track of those items. Alright, next step, we're going to take the 4 screws that hold the faceplate out in order to remove the faceplate and expose the screws to the grind chamber. Now on the newest evolution of the GH2, you have these little air vents over there on the side, and you can stick the faceplate in there. It holds it pretty nice. You can check to make sure a wire hasn't pulled off your start on off run button if you have trouble starting the device. There's also a over limit in the back. Now you see we have exposed the grind chamber, and there are 4 screws on the front portion of the grind chamber that are a 3mm hex. So we just need to get those loose. They're a little tight. Alright, now when you get this last screw loose, there is a spring on the inside pushing back on your rotary burr carrier. We call it a pre-breaker. But that will push the grind chamber out off the other portion. You can just slide it right on out. Don't lose your screws. Nice shiny grind chamber. Very simple. Spindle adjusts this part in and out. Okay, so now that we have the outer portion of the grind chamber off, this is a small cap which has a bearing that spins to keep everything from making abrasions on the inside of the grind chamber. It also is holding the shear plate, which connects the rotary carrier and the shaft together when they're lined up correctly. When they're lined up correctly, you can make the burrs touch like that. When they're not, you are not able to push all the way forward. We put the cap back over that, pull the entire rotary carrier off. That's that spring that was pushing there for us. These are your burrs, and that's your shaft. This is the back side of the grind chamber. This is the path the beans take. You want to clean this occasionally, and occasionally you're going to have to replace your burrs. We're going to go and reassemble the grind chamber with the rotary carrier, put that back in. One thing we like to do, and I'll try to get this into camera here, is use a sanitary lube. Get a little bit of that on there. I often use liberal amounts, especially on an older machine, but being this is a newer machine, I just put a little bit inside the pre-breaker before sliding it on. Everything likes a little bit of lube. Then you have your shear plate already installed. Put the cap on. If you're very lucky and patient, whoops, we're missing something. Spring has to go in. Okay, so if you're very patient, you can push it straight on the shaft, and then you're trying to line that shear plate up with your shaft, and you wiggle it a little bit, and look there, I hit the sweet spot. I'm able to make the burrs touch by kind of putting a little force on it. So now I back off and let go carefully, and we are going to reinstall the grind chamber. Try to press it up against there and get one screw. I usually start with the left top ear, but one screw started and in to hold everything in place. Alright, so we'll do that. This outer part of the grind chamber on, I did want to show you one thing. 4 screws hold on the spout. The spout has a little bag thumper on it, and the bag thumper has some protective vinyl or rubber material on it in order to keep it, from sounding too loud in the cafe. But I don't know if you can see this, but down in there is also a rubber flapper, and that flapper helps. It's like a declumper, maybe puts a little bit of retention on the grind chamber. It's good to replace those every once in a while. Sometimes when you see something acting up, that's also a place you want to clean, is that area right there, because it can clog up. Here we go. We're going to try to get this in one go. I do like to pre-install one of the screws and kind of have it ready. Alright, so slide it over the rotary carrier all the way to the grind chamber, and then come back behind while you put a little pressure on there. There we go. You always got to be careful to make sure you do not cross thread things, but that feels really nice. Okay, and I kind of pull it together. I don't really tighten it. I just kind of get it almost tight and stop and install the other screws. And I go back and give the last little snug. So now it is time to calibrate. First thing we are going to do is run the grinder. I have spun the spindle till it couldn't go any further and backed off just a little bit to make sure the burrs are not touching. Run the grinder. Move the burrs finer together. That's the burrs touching right there. You back off just until that's not happening and shut the grinder off. Next you have this dial adjustment ring, and you'll see one half of it pokes out here. That's the half that hits this well that pokes out on the bottom. So you put it on the spindle and then spin it without moving the spindle. You spin it to the right until it can't go any further, or clockwise, however you'd like to call it, and then tighten the two set screws. Once you have that done, then you can't forget you have this spring and this little rubber piece here that go into this well, which puts tension on the cap. Then you have your circlet inside the cap with the missing gap in the circlet is right where the indicator is. You want to put this on and turn it to its finest position. Go. And then screw everything together. That's a long screw. Alright, there we go. We're back together. Ta-da! We're going to try to look at is, first of all, this little house here is where the over limit lives, and if your grinder bogs down and the motor calls for too many amps, that will cause everything to shut down, and you need to take that off and reset it by pushing it with your finger. If it has gone off, it will click when you push on it. Then there's also the capacitor and two relays in there. So what we want to do actually is get access to those two relays by taking the 6 screws off the back panel. Once you have the screws out, you just lift a little bit, the panel should come out. This set of wires right over here are actually running up to the switch in front. So there's always a chance you can pull a wire off a switch, and if your grinder isn't starting, the chances are it's either this over limit, or a wire is off the switch, or one of these two relays right here has gone bad. And important to note, always unplug your grinder. This grinder is unplugged. Always unplug your grinder when you're getting into it. Quick, I want to go into how these relays work. The grinder in this case is plugged in. I hope you're in frame there. I think you are. The grinder's plugged in. One of these relays is the start relay, and one is the stop relay. And when they're working properly, you can start the grinder. See, one relay is on. Then you can turn off the grinder. And there's a middle position on the switch, because in the middle position, neither light is on when you purposely put it in the middle position. However, when you toggle it on and it pops back, it'll stay on, and when you turn it off, it'll stay on. So you are able to check to see if those relays are working or not simply by pulling the back panel out. I don't suggest holding on to it, but in this particular case, I know that I have everything safe. So that's how that works. One last thing I wanted to mention before one last thing I wanted to mention before we or consider ourselves done with just the intro to the GH2 there, um, is the burrs. The GH2 burrs are good for 2,000 pounds, and they're very affordable. So don't forget to replace your burrs.